Hello, and welcome back to River Rock Restoration. My name is Dustin Blystone, and this is the first content in my new series on the Bible study book that I wrote. Started writing in 2001 and finished it in 2007 and published it, which is here, Isaiah, a Biblical Microcosm. I'm doing a video version and going through the different sections of this study one at a time. So I did a couple of intro videos before this one to give you a perspective on just an overview of the whole study and some of my arguments and rebuttals to people who've argued against this concept. And so this particular video is going to be the first actual content. This is like getting through all the introduction and the preface and all that stuff, and now we're actually into the real meat of it, the real content of the study. So as we jump in here, I'm going to just get right to it to keep these videos as short as possible. That way people can more easily digest them. I'm going to try to shoot for about 10 to 15 minutes each video so that people can watch these more easily and go through this study one section at a time in easily digestible segments. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to jump over here to my screen view, and I'm going to go to the actual text. This is the PDF of the actual book here that we're looking at. And so this is, in the book, this is the section that starts going through the actual connections. So we have Book 1 and Chapter 1. Book 1 being Genesis, of course. Chapter 1 being the first chapter of the book of Isaiah. And so I'm not going to go basically and just read a book to you here. I'm just going to kind of highlight the main points and let you see for yourself. Okay, so Genesis being Book 1, it's the history, and it starts, of course, with the famous statement, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Now, that's Genesis 1:1. Isaiah, which is the first book of the prophets. So if you've seen my Metacosm study, you know that Isaiah is the 23rd book in the Bible. And as it's the 23rd book in the Bible, it's also, though, begins the very first book of the prophetic section. And so it's Isaiah 1:2 starts off with the prophecy that is given to Isaiah. And it says, "Listen, O heavens, and hear, O earth, for the Lord speaks." So I find this very interesting because in the first book, we have God speaking his creation into existence. And in the first book of the prophets, God is now speaking to his creation, both the heavens and the earth, for the Lord speaks. And so that's kind of the format of this study. You can get the PDF for free, so if you'd like to go and read all the commentary on all of these connections, you're more than welcome to. You can download it for free from lulu.com, or if you want to actually buy the actual book itself, comes in paperback or hardback, and so you can get either one. But I'm not going to go through all the commentaries. Sometimes I might highlight a few parts of it, but I'm basically going to just be showing the connections here like this. So this is the format that the book is written in. So if we go down also in Genesis, we will see, you'll kind of get a feel for how this study goes. Okay, so what happens in Genesis? The history, of course, we know. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also her husband with her, and he ate. That was the fall. That was the disobedience. That's where God had created this perfect place, placed them in the Garden of Eden, and actually Adam was created outside of the garden and placed inside of the garden, and then while Adam was inside of the garden, God caused him to go into a deep sleep, and that's where he took Eve and actually created her inside of the garden. So it's a little hint there as, of course, to the fairer sex, more refined, and more cultivated. You have the man being created outside of the garden, but the woman, his wife, is created inside of the garden. Now, we know that after the fall, God starts working on his plan of redemption, and he does that through Abraham, who he's going to eventually raise up Isaac to Abraham, and then Jacob to Isaac, and Jacob has his name changed to Israel. And so Israel is going to be his chosen people to bring forth the Messiah. And so look at what Isaiah 1:2 says, starting halfway through verse 2. It says, "Sons I have reared and brought up," he's speaking of Israel now, "but they have revolted against me. An ox knows its owner, and a donkey its master's manger, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. Alas, sinful nation, people weighed down with iniquity, seed of evildoers, sons who act corruptly. They have abandoned the Lord, they have despised the Holy One of Israel, they have turned away from him." So just like in the history, the first people, Adam and Eve, rebel in the garden, God's chosen people likewise rebel from the purpose and the ministry that God had appointed them to. So again, we see that parallel concept going from book 1 to chapter 1 of Isaiah. Okay, next one. Notice that this is Genesis 19, verse 24. This is the passage where the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. So God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, guess what? In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 9, Isaiah, speaking his prophecy from the Lord to the people of Israel, he says, unless the Lord of hosts had left us, he's speaking of Israel there, a few survivors, we would be like Sodom, we would be like Gomorrah. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom, that's Israel, and give ear to the instruction of our God, you people of Gomorrah. So here, in book 1, we see that God is the history of God raining fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it. And here God is likening his people to Sodom and Gomorrah because he is so displeased with their lack of obedience and faithfulness to the ministry he had called this special nation of people to. So again, we see that direct link there. And as we go on, we'll see the next one. Genesis 19:28. And he, that's Abraham that it's talking about here, looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land ascended like the smoke of a furnace. And here in Isaiah, it says in chapter 1, again, verse 7, your land is desolate, your cities are burned with fire. And the strong man will become tinder, his work also a spark. Thus they shall both burn together, and there will be none to quench them. And I think this has relationship to what we're facing today. We're seeing in the West, particularly California and Nevada, these hotbeds of sin and rebellion against God. And what's happening in those places right now? They're on fire. And so God doesn't change his view on sin as progressivism tries to turn sin and rebellion against God into some socially acceptable progressive thought process. God treats sin the same yesterday, today, and forever because Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay, and then next we see Genesis 19:25, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. So look at this. So again, this is Genesis book 1, and in Isaiah chapter 1, therefore the Lord God of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, declares, I will be relieved of my adversaries and avenge myself on my foes. I will also turn my hand against you and will smelt away your drosses with lye and will remove all your alloy. But transgressors and sinners will be crushed together, and those who forsake the Lord shall come to an end. So again, we see the direct connection between book 1 and chapter 1 of Isaiah. And this is the last one here. This is kind of a subtle one, but if you do the research on it, you can see it. In Genesis book 1, it says, "And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere." This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go towards Zorah. It was a lush and beautiful land. So Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward, thus they separated from each other. So if you go on and read the rest of this passage in Genesis, you'll see that Abraham, after Lot makes his choice, the Lord speaks to Abraham and tells him where he's going to go and the land that the Lord has chosen for Abraham. And it talks about Abraham going by the oaks of Mamre. Okay, so if you go read the rest of this passage, you'll see that Abraham is led by the Lord to the oaks of Mamre. So what oaks did Lot choose for himself? It doesn't really say the word oak there, but Lot goes to the place, and the oaks that he chose were what seemed good to his eyes. It seemed like it was going to be the best choice for him. It seemed like it was going to be the most beneficial, but it ended up being an absolute disaster, and Abraham had to come and rescue Lot out of his poor choices. So what does Isaiah chapter 1 say? "Surely you will be ashamed of the oaks which you have desired, and you will be embarrassed at the gardens which you have chosen. For you will be like an oak whose leaf fades away, or as a garden that has no water." So what happened in Genesis? Lot chose well-watered gardens, and by inference, he chose the oaks that he was later ashamed of, because he chose what seemed good to his eyes, his flesh. And Abraham chose by faith what the Lord wanted for him. And it actually ends up being Abraham who has to rescue Lot. And then later on, the angels have to rescue Lot from his poor choices. All right, so that's it for the chapter 1 to book 1 connections. I hope you have enjoyed this particular study, and I made it in, let's see, 12 minutes. All right, perfect. So I'm going to just keep doing more and more of these in a series. So I'm going to do book 1, chapter 1. The next one will be book 2, chapter 2, Exodus, and how it relates to Isaiah chapter 2. And I'm just going to be posting them in order on this channel for anybody who wants to avail themselves of these studies. God bless you. See you in the next video.